As of recently, The Witcher 3 got a new next-gen update that was supposed to breathe some life back into the game. CD Projekt Red did this by improving upon some of the graphical aspects of the game, with the most popular visual addition being ray tracing. And they just generally cleaned up old persistent performance issues. Loading times also got reduced, which is always a pleasant change. But one of the most notable additions that came with this next-gen update was the new quest that was inspired by the Witcher Netflix show. Today we'll be talking about the main protagonist of this quest, who he is, and the events that led him down the path it did. This new quest is called In the Eternal Fire's Shadow, and it finally makes use of the old and decrepit Devil's Pit that is located near the infamous Hanged Man's Tree in Velen. The Devil's Pit is always something that the community debated about, and we thought that it was going to stay irrelevant forever. Luckily, it got the recognition it deserved with this new next-gen update, and now we have yet another tragic quest that seems to fit right in with the cripplingly depressive mood of Velen. The quest in question can only be started if you're level 15, and you can get it from a very young, and might I say distressed deacon of the Eternal Fire outside of Devil's Pit. This deacon seems to have just finished his studies, and he seems genuinely interested in looking to help people.
Desperate times call for a witcher, huh? Thought your church frowned upon our kind. Mutants.
A mistake common in our ranks, alas. I discussed it at length with my mentor. All are capable of doing good in this world, genetic aberrations or not.
The reason why he made his way to the Devil's Pit in Velen is mainly because of what it once was. This pit and its mine system were once used to isolate victims of the Scarlet Fog Plague, and it served as a way for the Eternal Fire to cruelly quarantine anyone with the disease. About 300 years ago, the mine became increasingly unstable due to reports of wraith-like creatures emerging, and a certain Witcher of the Wolf School was hired to investigate and exterminate the threat. It turns out that the Scarlet Fog Plague was the least of their worries, and that something far more sinister had poisoned and haunted the mine. The Witcher sent to investigate this was named Reinald, and he eventually succumbed to whatever creature was haunting the mine. After some investigating on our part, we learned that the creature behind the demise of this mine is a red miasmal. A red miasmal is a very unique type of specter whose very existence seems to breed pestilence and disease. And in this case, the specter formed as a result of all of the isolation and suffering that the Scarlet Fog Plague victims underwent in those mines. The specter was a direct result of their pain, and it thrived by possessing mortals and wreaking havoc through them. The only downside to this is that mortal bodies are in fact frail, and it continuously seeks out bodies of more powerful beings to possess. Moving on, the Witcher Reinald started to investigate the specter and finally caught on to what it could be, and in order to have a fighting chance, he needed certain types of potion ingredients from the outside world. Now, his timing is shrouded in bad luck, as the mine was then forcefully closed off from the outside world by the Eternal Fire. This likely happened because they were too afraid to let anything from the mine infect the outside world, yet what this did was even more catastrophic, as many more suffered at the hands of both the plague and the specter inside of the mine. Without the necessary ingredients, the Witcher Reinald eventually succumbed to the red miasmal's possession, and it now had the body of a sturdy Witcher to wreak havoc through. However, Reinald had one last trick up his sleeve, and he managed to trap himself and the miasmal in a chamber full of salt, which is perfect for deterring any sort of specter. This kept the miasmal contained to the salt cavern, without any real means for it to escape further into the outside world. Although clever, the miasmal's possession kept the body of Reinald from decomposing fully, even if he was technically long dead already. After exploring the entirety of the mine and finding Reinald's notes, we can see just what kind of a Witcher he was. He seemed determined and righteous, similar to what Geralt displays at times, but luck and fate simply weren't on his side at that moment. He also goes on to mention Osmund in many of his notes, which was another fellow Witcher from the School of the Wolf. He thought Osmund was eventually going to save him, but as we see in this quest, that unfortunately never came to fruition, and Osmund likely couldn't find him in the end, or he just didn't start looking for him. If you decide to delve deeper into the mine, you will eventually find Reinald's body within a cluster of salt stalagmites. You'll then be able to free his body and interact with what at first glance seems like Reinald. However, if you test him through other dialogue options, you'll quickly see that things don't really add up here. This leads us to believe that we're talking to the miasmal instead of Reinald himself, and whether you give the miasmal in disguise the potion or not, Reinald's spirit will shine through in the last second and warn you. This will instigate two fights, one against possessed Reinald and then the other against the red miasmal in its full and hideous form. Once you defeat both forms of the miasmal, Reinald's spirit will rise from his body, and this is when you can finally get to know more about this enigmatic Witcher and his fate. Reinald seems to think that little time has passed since his imprisonment in this mine, and he was at first convinced that Geralt was sent by Osmund or someone from Kaer Morhen. Geralt proceeds to explain to Reinald that he's been here for more than 300 years, which deeply upsets an already tortured soul.
Reinald, that's more than 300 years past.
300? No. No! They'd have sent another to find me after 5, 10 at most. Osmond himself would have come. Shit.
I'm sorry.
Upon learning that no one came for him, Reinald feels immediate abandonment and despair. His emotions settle in pretty quickly, and it's tragic because of just how much hope he held out in the beginning. His act of staunch resistance against the miasmal proved to us that he was probably among the best witchers that roamed the continent around the late 900s, and that his actions helped save the lives of many. If he was given the right to leave the mine to search for ingredients, all of this could have indeed ended differently, but it is what it is. After Geralt's debriefing, Reinald seems to take on a defeating and bitter attitude, which is understandable considering the circumstances. So many poor souls were condemned to that wretched mine, and what likely eats at Reinald is the fact that he was the only person in there capable of changing the tide. I can't imagine what he felt at the time, and his letters seem to suggest that hopelessness was slowly creeping into the confines of his mind. Despite the miasmal's best efforts to possess Reinald, he still somehow continued resisting it, both mentally and physically. And although he was eventually possessed, he taught the Spectre that there's a price to pay for messing with the spirit and body of a seasoned witcher. His bitterness and anger are more than justified in this case. Churches and societies like the Eternal Fire have always treated witchers with disgust, and a witcher's path in life usually ends because of someone's indirect negligence or ignorance. Although the Eternal Fire didn't lock the mine specifically because of the Witcher, he still suffered greatly at the hands of those who deemed him unworthy, and the same applies to the victims of the Scarlet Fog that littered the mine.
I failed to fathom. How could they let this happen? The bodies, the blood, so much blood. I had no idea.
This case is the perfect example of the potential outcomes that the path has in store for witchers all around the continent. It's a never-ending battle of hunger, indifference, and fatal enigmas. We see the same pattern of struggle in Gaten the Catskool Witcher, who was also somewhat of a victim of the indifference that the Witcher's path threw at him. I don't condone what he did in the quest Where the Cat and Wolf Play, but you can't say that the massacre at Honorton wasn't the culmination of what Gaten suffered through every single day on the path. Although the situations aren't that similar, Gaten did survive the initial attempt at his life, but Reinald wasn't so lucky in the end. If you're interested in a more thorough analysis of the moral dilemma surrounding Gaten, make sure to check out my video on if you should kill him or not. There's a lot to unpack in that one. You can help Reinald let go of his anger by bringing the young deacon to him and convincing him that the kid is not at fault for the transgression of his predecessors centuries ago. The young deacon seems fair for someone in the Eternal Fire, and once you explore the entirety of the mine, you'll realize that not all clerics and priests of the Eternal Fire bear hatred towards those who are different.
What am I doing? Resisted a red miasmal for centuries, damn it. Now I can't find the strength to forgive this boy. As if hatred kept me sane all these years.
Helping Reinald let go of his anger is undeniably the better choice here, as it will give him actual peace in death, and not many souls in this mine had the luxury of getting that, unfortunately. Furthermore, Reinald remarks that he was young and ambitious, nearly always trying to care about the greater good. A witcher that is conscious of his role and power in the world is very rare. The fact that Reinald had the desire to philosophize about the world's societal problems shows his commitment to the role he's been given as a witcher. All of this was sadly stripped away from him by entities that thought they knew better. And this is exactly the problem with the cultist-like mentality of the Eternal Fire. Their selfish and careless nature has repeatedly erased the potential of those who are actually capable of changing the world around them. The light of the eternal fire is supposed to breathe new life into the world and cleanse people of their sins, yet all it realistically does is extinguish the little good that is left in people.
Used to care about the greater good. Young, ambitious. The will to fight burned strong in me. Now I'm just tired. Don't have the strength, no desire to philosophize, and I won't rejoice about the world's salvation. Time took that from me.
The young deacon eventually leaves the church and hopes to transform the Devil's Pit into an actual sanctuary for the afflicted. Now here's hoping he follows through with that choice. To end this on a more philosophical note, the concept of morality and the events that define it are why I love the Witcher universe. The choices that players make throughout the game can have significant consequences on the world around you, and the theme that surrounds these choices is in most cases up to what you or Geralt think is the lesser evil.
Made a difference here, Reinald. For him and many more.
I'm sure another name would suit it better. I'm no saint, no miracle worker. Just a Witcher. And I'd rather it stayed that way.